Today, I want to talk about one of the three A's. Success generally comes down to getting the three A's about right. So A number one is you have to have the right acumen. You have to have the right set of skills. A number two is activity. You have to be doing enough of the right things with, of course, enough skill. And then the third A is attitude, or more accurately, in my estimate, mindset. Get those three things right, and you're almost guaranteed to have success. Today, our focus is going to be on mindset. And let me start with the premise that of the three A's, mindset is the most important. All success begins with mindset. So the premise is, if you're a business owner, if you want to have a better business, first, the business needs a better owner. You know, it's a bit of a riddle, but that person is you. And what we're going to be doing today is unpacking what I mean by that. So many business problems are personal problems in disguise. In fact, much of business coaching is helping the owner become better about their own mindset, and we're going to unpack that today. So all success begins with mindset. So this started for me when I read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, The New Psychology. And you can see she's a PhD, she's a doctor, a professor at Stanford, so a gifted, talented, intelligent woman. And in this book, she said people have one of two mindsets. They're either fixed, as in intelligence is static, or growth, intelligence can be developed. The result of which, if you're a fixed mindset, it leads to a desire to look smart. If with a growth mindset, it leads to a desire to learn. When it comes to challenges, fixed avoids challenges, growth embraces challenges. When it comes to obstacles, fixed gives up. Growth mindset persists in the face of those setbacks. When it comes to effort, one sees it as fruitless, the other one sees it as the path to mastery. When it comes to criticism, ignores criticism, others learn from criticism. And the person with a fixed mindset is threatened by the success of others, and the one with the growth mindset sees the success of others as the source of inspiration. And as you can imagine, one plateaus early and the other one reaches ever higher levels of achievement. The fixed mindset is focused on judgment. The growth mindset is focused on improvement. What does it sound like? I'm so stupid, I'm awesome, I can't do math. Or on the other hand, what am I missing? I'm on the right track and I'm going to be better at math. And what I find interesting about this is the judgment one. I'm awesome at this. On the face of it, it's kind of a positive statement, isn't it? And of course it is. And yet it implies that if you're awesome, there's no more awesome to be at, and you're as awesome as can be, and there's no more possibility. Whereas in the second example on the right-hand side, there's an implication that there's more to be had, more to be gained. If you're interested in testing your own mindset, there's a place online you can do that. I didn't find the test itself all that insightful, but if you're interested, there's a place where you can go. So when I first read the book, I felt like it was a bit black and white, a bit limiting. Is that all there is, Carol? You mean the whole world comes down to you're either fixed or growth, and that's the only prism I need to, view the people that I work with? And at first I kind of dismissed it. And then as I started to think about it, I recognized that what Carol was talking about really kind of other thought leaders, authors had written kind of the same thing or had the same insight, although they expressed it in a very different way. And so what I want to do in the next few minutes is talk about 4 of those perspectives and see if you don't agree that they're all all related, or all in fact have a common sense. So the first of which is Stephen Covey wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the first of the 7 is be proactive. And the sort of clever way that he had of expressing it is your response able, in other words, able to choose your response. What does that mean? Proactive people focus their efforts on circle of control, reactive people on their circle of concern. So the circle of concern is what everyone else thinks about, their attitude, their opinion, their behavior, their expectations. And as you can see, your personal power gets diminished or declines as you give the other sources more and more power. Although I have to confess that when I get cut off in traffic by what I deem to be a bad driver, I still get triggered by that and react. I'm not responsible. I'm triggered, and probably with no good reason. On the other side is their circle of concern. It's everything that you have dominion or agency over: your words, your thoughts, your reactions, where you live. And in fact, that is where your personal power comes from. The more you rely on yourself, the more powerful you become as a person. Let me sum it up for you. Anytime we think the problem's out there, that's the problem. Anytime you think the problem is out there, that's the problem. Another person named Julian Rotter in the 50s came up with the idea of where is your locus of control. And so his way of thinking about it is, if you have an internal locus of control, you make stuff happen. If it's to be, it's up to me. If you have an external locus of control, things happen to you. You don't have any control over those things. Things happen and you have to react to it. And the third is Jack Canfield, who many of us know as the chicken soup for the soul guy, is also a thought leader on success, wrote a book called The Success Principles. There are 63 principles, the first of which is E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals outcome. Something happens, an event, it produces an outcome. If you don't like that outcome, the only thing that can change is what you did about it. What would I have to do differently so that I can produce an outcome that's better? And so just as a reminder, there's the book, 7 Habits. Jack Canfield's on the right, The Success Principles. And Julian Rotter, if you do a search for him on Wiki or Wikipedia, you'll get a more complete discussion about the locus of control. And then the fourth one is this idea of above and below the line. So those people below the line blame others, make excuses, or deny there's a problem. People above the line take ownership, they're accountable and take responsibility. Below the line, BED, you're in bed. Above the line, OAR, you have your oar in the water and you're steering your ship in the direction that you want it to go. If you're below the line, you have a victor mentality, no control, high stress. If you're above the line, you have a victor mentality because you feel a sense of control, and as a result, you're not experiencing stress. So one thing you might consider doing in your business or with the people that you come across with every day is following a little bit of a role play. Could we agree that you and I are going to live above the line? That's awesome. And if you feel like I've gone below the line, would you point that out? Would you support me? Would you call me out on it? Terrific. Thanks for that. Now, can I do the same for you? And assuming the answer is positive in both of those cases, what we've now done is kind of created a social contract that we're going to live by the standard of taking responsibility for everything that comes in our lives, and that we're never going to blame or point fingers, because yes, sometimes we don't control the environment. Sometimes we don't control inflation. We don't control recruiting or how hard it is to get workers. But the one thing, we don't control our environment, but that doesn't mean that we're victims of the environment, because what we do can change. How we respond can change. The environment we have no control over. Our response we control entirely. So I did a little bit of a mind map to kind of map out what Carol had to say, growth versus fixed, and what the others had to say, be proactive, locus of control, E plus R equals O, play above the line. And you can see that in each case, the green is matched against a red. So focus of control, as opposed to circle of concern. You make stuff happen versus stuff happens to you. E plus R equals O. And then above and below the line, BED, or in bed, above the line, OAR, you take responsibility. So in fact, as I thought about it and got some insight, I recognize that this is a universal principle. What Carol had to say, I'd probably say it in a different way, but the principle that she had in mind is universally true. And if there's anything you take away from our time together today, you Anytime you think the problem's out there, that's the problem. So if you have any questions, I'd love to chat with you about it. I'm easy to get a hold of. Go to timewithjohn.com, timewithjohn.com. That'll take you to my calendar, and we'll have a 15-minute chat about whatever it is that you're thinking about. If you've got a question, a comment, or want to push back, please feel free to do that. So let's move on. My question for you is, as we think about the first four principles, the question we ask ourselves is, who am I? Well, the only thing we ever get to see people is what they say and do. Observable behavior. We can see it or hear it. Or physiology, I mean tone of voice, body language, and perspiration. Again, observable, and that's what drives the results. On the input sides are background skills and knowledge, and those are driven by goals. But for all of us, it goes through a filter, and that filter is our mindset, or how we perceive, the lens with which we view the world. So I want to take the next few minutes to unpack each of those 5 levels of mindset. So the first of which is, what's a belief? Well, let me ask you, what's the first 3 words that come to mind when I say the word salesperson? Is that what you think about? This guy from the movie Fargo, he was the epitome of weaselly and dishonest. Or how about this guy in Glenn Ross, always be closing, very pushy and manipulative. Or maybe your view of selling is to be fast talking and slick, like this guy was in The Wolf of Wall Street. And so there's an elephant in the room, isn't there? If you hold those things to be true about selling, somewhere in your subconscious, it's going to get in the way of your ability to be effective when you're out selling whatever it is you do in your business. And certainly all of us are in some position of leadership, which is ultimately persuasion, which is ultimately selling others onto a point of view. And so if you hold that to be true, you can't be good as a salesperson. You can't be excellent as a salesperson unless you can convert that thought away from selling as something that's not admirable to selling as something that actually provides service and value to people in the world. I have some ideas about that, and if you're interested, timewithjohn.com. So let me ask you another question. What are the first 3 words that come to mind when I say the word money? What is money? Money, by the definition of a dictionary, is only an abstract concept backed by confidence. In fact, money isn't anything except what we hold to be true about it individually as individuals and collectively as society. Money is an abstract concept. Lots of you are thinking about it. It's a means of exchange and it's currency and all those kinds of things. And all of that is true. But at the absolute level, let me give you a sense of this. As I described for you, the entrepreneurial ladder. So an employee thinks about money as earning a salary. They trade their time for money. A self-employed person makes money. They produce money out of thin air. You can see the verb is a bit different. An owner thinks about money as receiving profit from an arm's length third-party entity. An investor thinks about return on investment. And at the entrepreneurial level, Warren Buffett doesn't work for money. Money works for him. Let me give you an example. Do you know the story of the person who wins the lottery and 5 years later that person is broke? The average middle-class person thinks, what do you do with money? You spend. Now, if I gave that money to Warren Buffett, what would he be thinking? Of course, he'd find a way to deploy the money. He has an entirely different relationship. How he thinks about money is entirely different. It's a mindset thing. Many of us on the call here own a business, but in truth, we have a job. We're actually self-employed. We operate as a self-employed owner of a job in the business with our name on it. And you can't operate as the owner of your business unless you shift your mindset to having the money mindset of a business owner. So beliefs are like opinions. And like opinions, you can have an opinion, but that doesn't make it true. That doesn't make it so. And so opinions, like beliefs, are a concept that we hold to be true, even if they aren't. So let's talk about values. So values and beliefs, many times we use these words interchangeably in everyday life, but today I'd like to separate them out. What are values? Well, values are things like integrity or honesty or parental values, which is a collection of values that parents hold. Where do values come from? Values tend to be concepts that we adopt from external sources of authority. So those are our parents, our teachers, the church, sometimes the people that we hang out with. And so values are concepts that we hold to be important. Beliefs are the byproduct of our experiences and the conclusions we draw from that experience. So beliefs are created internally. Values are adopted from external sources. Now, what's our identity? Our identity is anything we say to ourselves about ourselves when no one else is looking. And we typically say those things with I am, I can't, or I can. I am, I can, or I can't. Let me give you an example. We're going to go to two people. One of them says, no, thanks, I'm trying to quit. They're a smoker, they're trying to quit smoking. We go up to the other person, we offer a cigarette, and that person says, no, thanks, I am a non-smoker. Well, which of the two are likely to be successful? Well, in the first instance, that person's still thinking of themselves as a smoker who's just denying themselves that cigarette. In the second instance, that person's identifying as a non-smoker, and as a result, asks themselves, what are the decisions I would make if I was a non-smoker? It wouldn't even occur to me to have a cigarette. So how does culture affect your mindset? Well, let me tell you a story. In 2003, I was in Japan and I was on a train. And it was remarkable to me. There was probably about 50 people on the car, and it was remarkable to me because I was easily the tallest person on the train. And what was even more remarkable is I was the only non-Japanese person. And that was a bit gobsmacking because in my town, at least, and perhaps in yours, anytime I got onto a train, the entire United Nations is likely to be represented. And here I was on a train where it was clear that being from someplace else was an exception when you're living in Japan and living in an island. And how does environment act as a filter? Where would be the worst place to send a criminal? Worst place to send a criminal is to prison. I know it seems like a paradox, but if you're a criminal and you get sent to prison, you're basically being sent to a mastermind for criminals. Because you're, as Jim Rohn would say, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Pick your friends carefully. We can see they're on a continuum from more conscious to subconscious. And Lewin came up with this idea, a bit of arithmetic. Behavior is a function of a person and their environment. And I, more accurately, in my opinion, feel that behavior is a function of a person and their mindset. And let's just go ahead and call that Neuenberg's equation, if you want to humor me a little bit. So thinking about Ilya Prigogine, he got a Nobel Prize because he made this observation. And it sounds like a bit of gobbledygook, but effectively what he was saying is you could reverse the effects of entropy. And entropy is the idea that everything in nature grows and then dies. And his observation was that if you applied enough pressure to a substance in a contained space, you could reverse the effects of entropy. And he coined the phrase perturbation, to be perturbed. And so that's how coal, instead of turning into coal dust, turns into another form of carbon. If you apply enough pressure, that's how diamonds get created. So how is this relevant to our discussion of mindset? Well, everything you want in life is just outside your comfort zone. And when you get to the edge of your comfort zone, that's the growing zone. And what do we experience when we get to the edge of our comfort zone? By definition, it feels uncomfortable. We're experiencing perturbation. And if we choose not to lean into that perturbation, we go into the dying zone. So everything is either growing or dying, and that includes us as human beings. Let me tell you a story about that. Was a pretty avid skier. I used to ski 50 times a year sometimes. And that's me at a resort in the Monashees. And again, that's me for scale. And those are two snowcats to kind of give you a sense of the slope here. And what skiers love to do is to ski powder. And on a day we're in a resort accessed area like Whistler, on a day when there was lots of powder, you'd go out early, you'd be standing in the lift line sometimes as much as an hour early so that you get to be first. But by the time noon arrives, much of the mountain is already skied off, or all the fresh powder, the unbroken powder has already been skied off. And what that means then is you start skiing in the areas that were harder to access. Still within the resort, but now you're skiing through the woods, you're jumping off of rocks and things like that to get to places where other skiers wouldn't be able to go. And I was pretty comfortable doing that stuff. And then I moved to Toronto and lived in Toronto for 5 years. And believe me, there isn't any skiing, what I would call skiing anyway, in Toronto or anywhere in Ontario. And so that what I meant then is I only skied about a week a year, and that would be around my birthday, which is March the 1st. So, my buddies would be skiing since November, and I joined them on, in that first week of March, and we'd be going up early for the powder days. And towards the middle of the day, when we started skiing through the woods and jumping off the rocks, suddenly I was now very uncomfortable. And this is what I learned: if you're not pushing the edges of your comfort zone shrinks. So areas that I used to be able to go to pretty comfortably, I no longer could, because my comfort zone shrank. Now, the thing about the comfort zone is if you go too far past the comfort zone, you can go into this area of panic or danger. And this is when you're frozen and stuck. And to some, it can look like you're at the edge of your comfort zone. And in other cases, it looks the same, but now it's an entirely different problem. And the thing you want to do is walk back off of the ledge back to that place where you're in the growing zone. So my job as a coach is to push you out of your comfort zone. Your job is to let me know if we've gone so far that you're experiencing panic or danger, because then we'll take an entirely different approach. So Yerkes Dodson came up with this formula, with this thought in 1910. And on one axis, on the y-axis, we can see performance goes from weak to strong. And on the x-axis, depending on the amount of tension, arousal, and anxiety we're experiencing from low to high, we can see there's this optimal point at the top of the bell curve. Not enough, and we're not performing at our best, and too much, and now we're kind of stuck or in that panic zone, which is what we were talking about earlier. So there's this optimal place over here. But my question for you is this: you're an Olympic skater, and it's now the next 2 minutes are going to define your life. The next 2 minutes and how you perform is going to probably influence the rest of what your life becomes. And my question always was, how could they do that? How could they deal with the stress that you'd have to be feeling? And whenever you'd see an interview of those guys from the day before, the interviewer would ask, what are you expecting for tomorrow? And they'd always say, I just want to have fun. And I'd be like, there's no way that's what that must be just for PR purposes. And then as I thought about it, I came to realize, wait a minute, they were like 8 years old, hypothetically, and they were easily the best skater in their community. And they started competing at regional events, and they were good enough to get, a full ride in college and get a scholarship. And now they're competing at the collegiate level. And they were so good at that they tried out for the national team, and they were good enough to get on the national team. And then they're competing internationally. And in the year before the Olympics, the event is always held at the actual site where the Olympics. So by the time they get to that Olympic thing, they have been in their mind's eye practicing this for the vast majority of their life, from the age of hypothetically 8 to 20. So for them, their comfort zone has grown to the point where this is normal. You grow your comfort zone as you push the edge of your boundaries. So here's a thought. Today you are you. That's truer than true. There's no one alive who's youer than you. Dr. Zeus. Do you have a definition of the perfect you? you have a written record of who you're becoming, the best version of yourself, what you are, who you are when you're at your best self? And as you think about that question, let me ask you a bit of a tease. Would you get on an airplane if you knew the pilot didn't have a navigation plan? Of course not. That'd be crazy making. And yet, are you living your life without a plan of who you're becoming, who you expect to be when you're the journey of becoming the best version of yourself? If you don't, you're just flying in the fog, hoping that it leads to an okay place. Let me give you an example. Or before I do, let me just say, if the owner wants a better business, first the business needs a better owner. Let me give you that example. So Ben Franklin, at the age of 20, was sailing back. He went to school in London. He was sailing back to Philadelphia, and he wanted to develop a system to develop his character. And in it, he wrote his 13 virtues. So temperance, eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Number 2, silence, speak not what may benefit others or yourself, avoid trifling conversations. So number 1 is don't get drunk. Number 2 is don't gossip. And so you can see he had a standard of a code of conduct, a set of expectations for himself. And what he did, this card on the left, you can see there were days of the week, Sunday through Saturday across the top, and the first few letters of each of the virtues. And what he would do is each week he would select one of the virtues and make that his focus for the week. So in this particular week, he chose silence. Looks like he got with his buddies on Sunday, and as he reflected on the day, he gave himself an asterisk because there was likely an occasion where he was gossiping. Now, he would select one of these each week. If you have 13 of them, you're going through them once every 3 months, which happens to be the perfect quarter of the year, and that means you're rolling through them 4 times a year. And as he said in his biography, the other 12 lay where they may at any point in time. At the end of his life, he said, I didn't always live up to my own expectations for myself, but I'm a better man for trying. Well, by the way, you can see on the right-hand side, he has a version of a default diary as well. You may want to ask me about that. So what are affirmations? Well, here are some affirmations. This is the definition of myself, of who I hold myself to be. You'll see they all start with an I am statement. These are all the ways that I identify myself. And it's my definition of my perfect mindset. Now, I don't mention this to impress you, but rather to impress upon you, there is a way that you can write your own navigation plan of who you're becoming or when you're at your best self. So how do you do affirmations? That always starts with the words I am. You use it in the present tense. You state it in the positive. You affirm what you want, not what you don't want. If I can tease you for a minute, don't think of a polar bear. And of course, the flash of a polar bear went through your mind's eye because the brain can't do a don't, it can only do a do. The brain can't do a negative, it can only do a positive. If you're a golfer, you know what happens if you say, don't go in the water, don't go in the water, don't go in the water. It's almost certain that you'll go in the water because the brain doesn't hear don't, it just says water. So the only way to avoid going in the water is to take a club and aim at the right side of the fairway with the idea that you'll draw it back into the center of the fairway. You want to affirm what you expect, not what you're looking to avoid. I point you, if you Google the phrase Jack Canfield, how to do affirmations, you'll be taken to this page. And for the price of an email, he's got a really good tutorial on how to write your affirmations. So let me encourage you, if you have the interest, to go and start the process of defining the best you can be. So the 2 most powerful words in the English language are the things you say to yourself about yourself when no one else is looking. The 2 most powerful words are I am. James Clear wrote a book, The Atomic Habits, and in the book he said if you get just a little bit better, 1% better each day, that compounds to 38%. 1 little grain of sand each day by itself doesn't count for a lot, but if you do it each day over the course of a year or a decade or a lifetime, slowly and surely you get better and better and better. And if you get 1% worse, you decline to 0.03% after the course of a year. So why does this all matter? Let me explain something called the reticular formation. So it's that area that's sort of purplish. It's the center or one of the most primitive parts of the brain, and all of our senses, sight, smell, touch, etc., they all get processed by the reticular formation. And why does this matter? Well, the reticular controls what you pay attention to, creates blind spots or filters, decides what's a threat and what you value. Hey, do you think about the particular car you drive? When you were shopping for that car, did you suddenly notice that make and model everywhere you looked? That's your reticular working. It's because when you suddenly develop an interest in something, your brain starts to notice those things everywhere you go. And on the other hand, it can create blind spots. So no, you can't smell a baby's diaper after 20 minutes. The smell doesn't go away. Your ability to smell it goes away because the brain basically says, if you haven't caught it now, it's too late. I can't help you. Or another version of it is in the early 80s, I moved into an apartment that in West Vancouver that was on the train track. So there's a train service that would go into the interior part of the province with loaded with all the goods and services and come back with timber and that kind of stuff. And the first night I'm sleeping there, and at 4 a.m, the train goes by, 4 a.m. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? Am I going to be woken every day at 4 o'clock as a result of this train? But what do you imagine happened after a couple of weeks? I didn't wake up anymore. The brain understood that that train wasn't a threat. I could just continue to sleep through it. The noise didn't go away, but my need to react to it, the brain understood it wasn't a threat. So the reticular decides what's a threat, what you value. So when you set goals, you're activating your reticular system. And what that means is as you write goals, as you write your I am statements, the brain starts to pay attention to all the things and influences in your environment that helps you achieve those things, because then it sets your direction and focus. It creates movement and momentum, and it's all really about the person you become. So the Navy SEALs put it this way: get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being perturbed, with experiencing perturbation. In this case, we can see it's being uncomfortable in a physical environment, but it's really, they also talk about it in the sense of the mental environment. And what that means is that you want to embrace perturbation, because everything you want is just on the other side of your comfort zone. And that's how you can become the best you can be. And all of this, to sum it up, is that if you wish to have a better business, become a better owner. Or as Jim Rohn put it, work harder on yourself than you do on your business. Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills. Don't wish for less challenge, wish for more wisdom. Identity is something you're constantly earning. It's an active process that you can be engaged in. And so you may have some questions about that. Again, time with John. And let me summarize our time together by quoting the words of Mahatma Gandhi. Your belief becomes your thoughts become your words become actions are habits become value, and your values become destiny, which is kind of a reframe or a restatement of the central themes of what we've been talking. So success does begin with mindset. Is your mindset set for success? Thanks very much for your time. Hopefully you got some value out of it. If you've got some questions, again, feel free to go to timewithjohn.com. Happy to chat with you about it. All the best.